Welcome. This is Pastor Bob Douglas coming to you again. I learned a new word this week, and I thought I'd share that with you and maybe even give you a few words of encouragement along the line of this new word. The word I was exposed to for the first time this week was Doomsurfing. Doomsurfing. I guess the meaning of it is something to do with feeling so negatively about what's happening in the world, facing so many major issues, beginning to feel hopeless, that there's going to be some sort of a positive resolution to all of the wars and and now the increasing cases of the new variant of COVID and all the other things. And people are going on the net or on the news and just expecting to hear the worst possible news of what is coming, the doom and destruction of the world. Is it going to be a nuclear response? Is someone going to send chemical weapons? Is there going to be the beginning of World War III? I don't need to go through all of that, do I? Because you know as much as I do about the tenuous nature of our world today. So I thought about that in a sense, and I was praying for some sort of insight that I could share with you. Came upon the story of a lady who had reached that same point in her life as someone who might be doom surfing. There just didn't seem to be any other solutions. And this story of the experience of Jesus is so key, it's so important, that it's recorded in both Matthew, Mark, and Luke. All three of those Gospels include this story in it. Let me just take a second. If you're looking for it, it's in Matthew 9:18 to 26. In Mark, it's Mark 5:21 to 43. And if you're looking in Luke, it is in Luke 8:40 to 56. So if you want to look those up, that would give you a chance to see, read the story yourself. Each one of the stories is a little different in the sense of, how much detail they got into. But this is a lady who is suffering, and suffering without hope. The story begins with Jesus being asked to go to the house of a very notable person, a very important person named Jairus, whose daughter is right at the edge of death. And he comes to Jesus and says that he requests that Jesus come to his house and touch his daughter and heal her from the illness that is just about to take her life away. And so Jesus agrees to go with Jairus to his home, and he turns and starts walking along with Jairus. And of course, this sends the crowd into a frenzy because they want to see what's going to happen. Curiosity seekers, or I guess we would call it, rubberneckers if it was something happening on the highway. They want to just kind of slow down and take in all of the damage of whatever's happened. So there's a lot of people who are very curious about what Jesus is going to do or what he's going to say or what's going to happen. So there's a big crowd. I mean, it's a mass of people, along with his own followers and with Jairus and his people, and they're all moving down the streets and passageways completely oblivious to a lady who has had a hemorrhage that hasn't stopped for 12 years. In Jesus' day, there were no hospitals, no emergency rooms, no internal imaging, no CAT scans or x-rays. The only way that you knew there was something wrong with your body was something that showed up on the outside. That's why skin conditions and open wounds were such an important part of the physical evaluation of your health. The book of Leviticus is a detailed description of all the things that you have to do and be aware of if you have something unusual or non-routine happening in your body. And there's all kinds of different regulations and rules, but it's primarily the priest who is the arbitrator of your health in the days before hospitals and doctors and medical science. There was no gene therapy, certainly. There was no germ theory. There was no viruses that anybody had even spoken about, because they didn't know how diseases were transmitted in the physical way it gets done. They just knew that they had a problem, and the only way to deal with it was isolate the people who were most heavily affected. Lepers were put into separate communities away from the society. They couldn't be with their families, they couldn't be with their friends, they couldn't be with anything, because they had a disease that could be transmitted person to person. They don't have to know germ therapy to know that people who get close to a leper are likely to come down with leprosy. And so that was the way that the Bible said to deal with people with physical problems. Now, someone who was deformed or had a crippled leg or was paralyzed, there wasn't anything you could catch from them. Someone who was blind or there was a different way of dealing with people who were disabled. But medically speaking, there were a whole spectrum of things they just couldn't deal with. There was no penicillin. There was no antibiotics. If you didn't get healed up in a matter of days or weeks, you had to go to the priest, and he would tell you what you would have to do. If you're curious about what would happen to someone who had a hemorrhage for 12 years, you can read Leviticus chapter 12, verses 1 to 8. Or if you want a little longer passage, you can look at Leviticus 15, verses 16 to 33. And you can get a pretty detailed picture in your mind that if something showed up on the outside of the body, it showed that there was something happening on the inside of the body. And the priest had to give you the instructions on how to take care of that. And once it had been healed, the priest would give you like a clean bill of health, and you could go back to life as routine. But it was difficult. Now, this lady in the story we're talking about this morning had had a hemorrhage for 12 years. Without any medical diagnosis that we would have today, you'd think something about cancer that she had, or maybe fibroid tumors or something like that. There'd be something wrong on the inside. We're not going to get into all of that. We're just going to try and say she tried everything. She had, according to the scripture now, suffered much in the hands of the physicians of that day. Well, doctors, nurses, medical people have tried a lot of different things to help people. It hasn't always been easy. and this lady had suffered a great deal. Now, if you think about what she had suffered with, she both had a physical problem, and it had weakened her. There was obviously pain involved. The suffering of 12 long, continuous years. The weakening of her body, the loss of her strength, the ability to even cope with daily activities, certainly was a part of what she had suffered with. The medical treatments, I'm immune compromised. When I show up in the emergency room, people start putting on moon suits because they must have an orange piece of tape on my file that says, this guy is immune compromised. There's no telling what he's got cooking inside of him. So they get not just rubber gloves and masks, they get into moon suits to take care of me. Well, not all those treatments are pleasant to go through. She'd suffered much at the hands of the people who were trying to help her in 12 years. Not only did she suffer physically, she suffered in her relationships. Because if you read the stories in Leviticus 12 and 15, you'll realize during the time there was a hemorrhage, for any reason, your life was changed. You couldn't have the same relationship with your community. You were in sort of an isolation chamber, a little bit like they do for me. I end up in a private room because they don't want any roommate getting whatever it is I might be having inside of me. Well, that's what was happening to her. She was isolated from her community, from her family, from her relationships. She couldn't have friends over and just sit down and have a cup of coffee, or whatever drink they were sharing. And there was no parties. She couldn't go to normal receptions. If her daughter was getting married, she couldn't go to the wedding. It was forbidden. She couldn't cook a meal for anyone. There was all kinds of limitations and restrictions on her interaction with people. Until the priest gave her a clean bill of health and sent her back into the community, she was in solitary confinement. Think about that. She was in solitary confinement for 12 years. Nobody knew what was wrong with her, but something was wrong. So she was in pain physically, and she was in pain in her relationships to her community. But I want to talk about something else. Anybody that had a physical problem was assumed by the people of that day, sometimes even people of this day, that it isn't just a physical problem, but you have a spiritual problem. In other words, if you have a certain theological background, let's say like the story of Job in the Old Testament, and the friends come around to try and encourage Job during his illness, the first thing out of their mouths is, well, Job, God must be mad at you for something, or he wouldn't allow, I will say allow, this kind of problem to come to you if he loved you, if he was smiling on you, if he was blessing you, if he was in favor of you, in his favor. So you must have done something pretty bad. I mean, Job, this lady, were all considered by the community of their day to have been a naughty person. You may have kept it quiet, but God knows, and He's punishing you for something that you have done. And that's very difficult to live with. Besides that, not only was she in pain physically and weakened physically and isolated in her relationships and condemned by her community, just like with people who were doom surfing today, she had given up hope, lost her chance to see a bright future ahead. She was out of options. It had cost her financially. It had cost her whatever fortune she might have had, whatever finances she might have had. They were all gone. They were used up. She had nothing left. If she wanted to go to a medical person or someone said, have you tried this? She couldn't afford it because she had already used up everything she had. She had nothing left. Until Jesus came into her community. And He was busy. He had important things to do. He had this very important man named Jairus, whose daughter was dying, and you just don't interrupt a man who's on his way to save a little girl's life. I mean, come on. She wasn't worth that. But in her heart, Jesus was her only hope. Jesus was her only possible solution to what was a very painful, devastating, ruinous situation. But how do you even get to Jesus? How do you even get close? The Bible stories tell us that she worked her way through the crowd that was surrounding Jesus, slowly making their way toward Jairus' house, and came up behind Jesus with the idea of if she could even just touch the fringe on the bottom of His robe, her disease would be healed. Now, I don't know how you picture that, how you get that in your mind. But in my mind, she's down on her hands and knees, crawling on the ground, trying to work her way between the legs of all the people who were crowding around Jesus, coming up from behind Him, moving as quickly as she can through the crowd. And at the very moment she gets close enough to reach, she reaches up and just touches the bottom edge of His outer cloak garment that hung down close to the ground. And instantly, she knew whatever problem, we're not going to put a name on it, but whatever problem she had in her body had been healed and made whole, healthy. But at the very same moment, Jesus spoke up and said, "Who touched my garment?" Well, the disciples are pretty much in shock. The crowd has come to a stop now. They're backing away from Jesus for a second, saying, touched you? There are many, many people in this crowd, and they're all trying to get close to you, and they don't want to miss anything, and they're all crowding around trying to see what's going to happen, and lots of people are touching you. No, he said it's different. Somebody touched me with a need. Somebody touched me and I felt power go out of me. Felt power leave me. And of course everybody started looking around. All right, what's happening? Who was this? What happened? We've stopped, headed toward Jairus' house. Who's interrupted this? But Jesus is insisting, somebody touched me. Somebody had a problem and they touched me, and power has gone out of me. Was he angry? No. But he was insistent that he had to know who it was. And out of the crowd, out of the press of the people all around, came a lady who was afraid that she had stolen something precious from Jesus, and she wasn't worthy. And she came out of the press of the crowd and fell on her knees in front of Jesus and said, "It was me. It was me." Now what's going to happen? Jesus looked directly to her, directly at her, and he said these words, "Daughter, your faith has made you well." I want to just stop here for a second. Daughter. If you've been sick for 12 years, you feel like your strength is all but gone, you've lost your finances, you lost every ounce of your net worth, you have nothing left, you're all alone, you've been in isolation for 12 years, and everybody believes you are worthless, cursed by God. Your life has been agony to live every single day. To have Jesus look you in the eyes and say, "My child, my daughter, my loved one, my possession, my family member." Oh my goodness! To go from being cursed, condemned, God is angry with you, you have no hope, you have no options, you are absolutely an outsider, you're not cast out of the city, but you're alone, and then to have Jesus look at you and say, not only are you loved and appreciated and blessed by God, you are my child, my favored child, my blessed child. You are loved. Go on your way. Be healed of your disease. wonderful words, wonderful truth that he spoke. But that wasn't the biggest miracle. That wasn't the miracle that changed her life. Oh, yeah, the pain was gone. In a few days, the priest was going to give her a clean bill of health, and she could go back into her community again. She could begin to rebuild friendships and family relationships again. But what was the bigger miracle? It's the miracle we need today for those who are doomsurfing. Here's what the miracle is today for you. You are loved. Jesus said to this woman, not just as an individual, but as a person who was a representative of everyone who's ever been given the diagnosis of cancer, who's ever been given diagnosis of Hodgkin's disease, whatever disease it might have been that seems like there's just nothing you can happen. I think of people who have MS and different things that are what we would call incurable diseases today. Lou Gehrig's disease. I mean, you can just have a whole list of them. And Jesus says the same thing to every single one of them. My child, I love you. Are all of them healed? No one dies of blood cancer or brain cancer or pancreatic cancer? No, that's not the issue. The miracle that happened to this lady is, I don't care what your world looks like today. I don't know what you're afraid of for tomorrow. I don't care what you're running from. I, Jesus says, love you as my child, and I'm going to take care of you. I'm going to be with you. I am going to love you. I am going to rescue you. You don't have to be afraid. That's the biggest miracle. And he took time away from his journey to Jairus' house to look her straight in the eye and say, you are important to me. You are important, valuable, precious to me. Let that sink in. Let those words, not just as to a single individual 2,000 years ago, but to you. Jesus today says to you, you are precious to me. I'm going to be here with you. I'm going to take care of you. I wanted you to hear that message of encouragement today. There is hope. You're not going to get it on the newscast. You're not going to get it from the internet. You have to hear it from the mouth of Jesus, from the words of Jesus, to a lady who had lost all of her options and her life was just miserable. And he said, daughter, I'm here for you. He's here for you too. Remember that. And put your heart in his hands. Put your fears in his strong hands. Put your hopelessness into his hands and reach out with your heart. Sort of like long distance, and touch the fringe of his garments and feel the power flow into your heart and mind and spirit. Just touch and feel it flow into you. God bless you.